Chizkiah.
Okay.
What are we talking about here? Yeah. So they would fill up a flask on Erev Shabbos for the water to do the libations on Shabbos. So why would they? But they specifically use a non-sanctified vessel. So it's trying to explain this: if you use a sanctified vessel, and all the water would be considered to be sanctified because there would be no shear to the water, and the vessel would automatically sanctify anything inside you if you didn't want it to. So then we understand why you have to be worried. That was the first explanation that we gave. Chizkiah, our second explanation, says, no, the truth of the matter is, that it's true that there's no specific shear, even if you would fill up more than 3 lugin, or according to Rabbi Yehuda, more than 1 lug of water, it would all become sanctified, but not if you didn't have in mind to sanctify it. But Gezerah, nonetheless, we didn't allow you to fill up in a sanctified vessel because of a Gezerah. People might say, oh, they had in mind to sanctify it and it stayed overnight. So we see that Lina, keeping a sanctified object overnight does not invalidate it, and that would be a mistake. I'm Rabbi Yanai, I'm Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Zera go a step further, and they say, even if you say Yesh Yolamai, but anything above the 3 lugin will not become sanctified. And not only that, even if it would become sanctified, it wouldn't be sanctified if you didn't have in mind to sanctify it, because the vessel wouldn't sanctify unless you wanted it to. Nonetheless, the gzera, what's the gzera? The gzera would be that people would think that you had filled up the water not for the purpose of an isuch hamayim, but for the purpose of the sanctification of the hands and the feet of the kohanim, which doesn't have a shear, and which would automatically, the vessels that were set aside for the sanctification of the hands, so they had in mind that they should be sanctified. Malon, that they were specifically filled up for the purpose of kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, and that would become sanctified. Because we need the water to be sanctified, just like the kior, the basin that was in the Zara was sanctified with the Shem and Hamishcha, so it would automatically sanctify all of the water that would come out of it. So they would think that this water had been sanctified in a similar fashion to Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, and therefore it would lead to a misimpression that if you left it overnight, that they would think that Lina, the leaving overnight, does not invalidate sanctified items. So for that reason, they were using non-sanctified kli. Fine. They said that if it would have poured out, so we understand why you would have needed to refill it on Shabbos from the kior, or if niskalsa, if it somehow was left unattended and it was open, and therefore you'd have to worry about Mayim Megulin, that maybe a snake came inside and injected some of its venom into the water, so that you'd have to pour that out as well and fill up with new water on Shabbos. If we're worried simply about the case where it became exposed, so why don't we just pour the water into a strainer, and that would strain out any of the snake venom. So Lema Masisa Lok Rabbi Nechemia. So the Mishnah then seems to be going not like Rabbi Nechemia, because Rabbi Nechemia holds that you could strain water from the snake venom. The Tanya, the Brisa says, Misnanis Yesh Bo Mishum Giloy, and in terms of water that would be fit to drink or not fit to drink. So if you have a misnanis, if you have a strainer, so you'd still, according to the Tanakama, you would have to still assume that yesh bo mishum giloy, and you wouldn't be allowed to drink it. Fine. Amar Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Nechemia says that's if the strainer, let's say I left water in a strainer and the strainer itself was exposed. So Rabbi Nechemia says, Masai, when is it that it's a problem even if the strainer is exposed? That's when a strainer, they had a strainer that consisted of an upper part and a bottom part. So if the bottom part was also exposed, that's where we would want the venom to kind of like stay at the top of the cover that goes towards the bottom part, and then the rest of the water would just pour down into the bottom part, and I wouldn't have to worry about venom. So as long as the bottom cover was still on and wasn't exposed, that would be okay. It's only a problem is mancha tachtona megula, when the bottom part is that separates between the top and the bottom. When that's exposed, because then maybe the snake could still go inside, it could go all the way to the bottom and inject its venom. But if the cover to the bottom is still intact, even if the upper part of the strainer is exposed, so you don't have to worry about the venom making its way all the way to the bottom. Because the venom of a snake is doma the safog. It's like the mold of the wine. The safog is here not an expression of sponge, which is what safog usually means, but it's a reference to the moldy part of the wine, which is sape omed bimkomo, which floats around and remains exactly in its place, and it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. So the same thing would be true of the venom, as long as the cover was still on to between the top and the bottom part. So we say, no, our Mishnah that says that when it comes to the water set aside for the Nisach Hamayim, if it was exposed, could be going even according to Rabbi Nechemia, that even if you would put it into a strainer, it would be a problem. Either strainer would strain out the venom according to Rabbi Nechemia because it doesn't make its way to the bottom. So we say, no, Afilu Tema Rabbi Nechemia, Ema de Rabbi Nechemia Lehedyo. I mean, Nechemia was saying that it's mutter to drink, that we say that once it's gone through the strainer, so then you could drink it and not have to worry about the venom, about the gavoa miyamar, but to offer it to up high, to offer it to a Kadosh Baruch Hu as part of a ritual in the Beis HaMikdash of pouring out the water libations. That's not the type of water that you want to present in front of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. They say, I mean, Nechemia, do you think Rabbi Nechemia doesn't hold by the pasuk in Malachi, which says that it's improper to take a blind animal or a crippled or a sick animal and to offer it as a korban to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even if it's not a treifa, it's just improper because it's hakribeo, not a pechasecha. You're going to bring to a Kadosh Baruch Hu as a korban a yirtzacha. You think he's going to like that? Or you sapanecha? You think he's going to show favor to you? Amar Hashem tzavakos. Do you think Hashem is going to show favor to you if you're going to bring a crippled or a sick animal as a korban? It's not a proper thing to do here too as well. You started out with mayim megulim, water that had been exposed and snake venom could have gone inside. Is it proper to offer such water even if you put it through a strainer? Even Rabbi Nechemia would agree to that. Hadran alach lulav arava. Good. On that note, maybe we should celebrate by playing a flute. So the flute. So when would we play the flute during Sukkot in the Beis HaMikdash? The playing of the flute would not override Shabbos and would not override Yontif. So Chamisha v'Shisha. Either you would play the flute for 5 days or for 6 days. For 6 days, if the first day, if Yontif fell out on Shabbos, the first day it fell out on Shabbos, you only would have 1 day. That would be problematic. And if the first day of Yontif was not Shabbos, so Shabbos would fall out one of the other 6 days of Sukkot. So then you would have 2 days of Sukkot that were either Shabbos or Yontif. Then you would only play the flute for 5 days. This is the challah. This is the flute that they would play when they had the great celebration of the libations. It was called the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. We still have, but we still mimic that. Nowadays, during Sukkot, we still have Simchas Beis HaShoeva celebrations. Sheina Dochlo is the Shabbos or Yom Tov. The playing the musical instrument, it does not override Shabbos or Yom Tov. Turn the page. Gemara.
I have a question. I thought that every day when the korbanos are being brought, they do play musical instruments along with the shir.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about now in the Gemara. They would play musical instruments when the korbanos were being offered. So why was this musical instrument somehow not allowed when it seems that other musical instruments were allowed on Shabbos and Yom Tov? So it could be Tosfos talks about this, and the Gemara seems to talk about it as well. Though here we're talking about not in connection with a korban, we're talking about in connection with the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. But that's what Rabbi yeah, we're going to see. We're going to have an opinion of Rabbi Yosef that we're going to talk about today. We're going to have an opinion of Rabbi Yirmiyah that we're going to talk about tomorrow. But for the time being, if we say this was a simply Yisera, this wasn't a musical instrument over a korban. So therefore, for this simcha Yisera, this extra party, we wouldn't have a special dispensation to play musical instruments on Shabbos and Yom Tov for this extra party. So the Gemara says, one said that the correct word is shoeva, that they would soak up. They would soak up this special kedusha, this special holiness during the Sukkot holiday, and that's what they were celebrating. That there was a simcha that was important. It was a chashuva simcha. Okay, so neither one is making a mistake. Shoeva is an appropriate term, and chashuva is an appropriate term. It was shoeva, they soaked up, and it was also important. It was also significant. If you say shoeva, that's not wrong. That's it, because after all, they were celebrating the Nisach Hamayim, the water libations, and the word that's used to connote that is ushartem, that you're soaking up, you're drawing the mayim b'sason with great joy. And the one who says chashuva lo mishtabesh is not making a mistake. The mamnachim mitzvah chashuvi, because it's a big mitzvah. The water libations are a big mitzvah. He assumes like the day that says that the shisin, in which the water was go down, that the shisin was devised from ba misheshis from the time of creation. So that's very significant. Tosfos quotes the famous Yerushalmi that it was Simchas Beis HaShoeva, because when you go to this celebration, the people who would go would draw from their inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit. And Yonah ben Amitai, my namesake, so he would go every single year to the Beis HaMikdash, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, in order to receive his Shechina. That's when the Shechina, the divine spirit, would rest upon him, because he would soak up the divine spirit in the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Tana Rabbanan, Echolel Doches Shabbos, the Cholel, the playing of the flute, override Shabbos according to not our Mishnah, but according to a different opinion. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda goes along with Eddie. He says, hey, we could play musical instruments when we bring korbanos. We could do it with the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. The Chachamim say not only is it not Docha Shabbos, it's not even Docha Yom Tov. Yom Tov ain't no Docha. So I'm of Yosef. So now we're going to have two different opinions about how to construe or understand this machlokes. One opinion is going to be Rabbi Yosef that we're going to discuss that today, and the other opinion is going to be Rabbi Yirmiyah that Mr. Hashem we're going to discuss tomorrow. So I'm of Yosef, machlokes b'shir shel korban. They're arguing about the shir that's played over the korban. That according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, that is a doche, and according to the Chachamim, even that's not doche. You bring a korban on Shabbos, so you don't play the music, you don't play the flute. You might play other musical instruments. The flute was played with a great fanfare and was accompanied by lots of different types of instruments, and that might be too much to worry about. That maybe one of them is going to break on Shabbos, and you might fix it even in the Beis HaMikdash. But to Rabbi Yossi, so what's the machlokes when it comes to shir shel korban? To Rabbi Yossi, Sava Ikar Shir B'Kli. Because Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that the main mitzvah, and the Gemara derives elsewhere, that there is in Maseches Erchin from lots of different psukim, that there's a mitzvah of having singing, that music that accompany the bringing of a korban, and he holds that the main part of that music is supposed to be with a musical instrument. So therefore, since this is an integral part of the korban, it would be appropriate to play with a harp and the lyre and also the flute on Shabbos. So Avodah, it's an Avodah, and we know as a general rule that an Avodah is B'doches Shabbos. It's Doches Shabbos. It's part of the Avodah, just like bringing the korban. B'moado, it be Afilu B'Shabbos. Rabban and Savi and the Chachamim say no. Ikashira B'peh. The main music is a cappella. You can do it. You don't need the instruments. It sounds just as good. You bring the Maccabees, whatever. It sounds just as good. You do it. You do it just with your voices. And therefore, the playing of the musical instruments is not a necessary part of the avoda. But when you're dealing with Val Shir Shel Shoeva, but the music that they would play in connection with these extra celebrations on Sukkot of Simchas Beis HaShoeva, so Divrei Kol Simchahi, that's not an avoda. It's just an extra simcha, an extra dose of happiness. That's not Doches HaShabbos. Ain't a Doches HaShabbos. I'm of Yosef, Mina Dvar Pligi. So if Yosef says, how do I know that this is what they're arguing about? The Tanya, because the Brisa says, Kishares, Shasan Shel Eitz. If I made a Kishares that would be out of wood, it would be out of wood. So Rabbi Posel, Rabbi Yosef, Bar Yehuda, Machshir. So we have a machlokes whether that's considered to be a viable Kishares or not. Rabbi says it's not a viable klisharis, and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, no, even if it's made out of wood, it would be a viable klisharis. So what are they arguing about? So according to Rabbi Yosef, they're arguing about this precise point. They're not arguing about the following. The one who says that it is okay, namely Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, is of the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, is the same Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, that argued with the Tanakam of our Mishnah, or seemed to, maybe, according to Rav Yosef, in our Mishnah, maybe he's not arguing because our Mishnah is talking about Simchas Beis HaShoeva. At least he argues about whether the Cholol is Doches Shabbos in connection with the Korban. So, man the Makshe Sava Ika Shira B'Kli, B'Alpina Me'abuva de Moshe. We would derive that a wooden musical utensil would be good as a klishares because we derive from the reed flute, the flute that was made out of reeds, which is wood, that was utilized by Moshe Rabbeinu. They tried to cover it with gold, but it didn't sound as good when they overlaid it with gold. So they took the gold overlay off, and it was sounding much better when it was just a wooden reed flute. So therefore, they're able to derive from there that just like Moshe had a reed flute, so any klisharis made out of wood would be okay. Man de pasel, they're made out of twigs or wood would be okay. Man de pasel save ikashira bepeh. And the one who says, no, I can't derive from that would say, no, that the main service of song in the Beis HaMikdash is through simply singing. Below Yapina me Avuva de Moshe, and therefore you can't derive from Avuva de Moshe because it was not integrally required in order to perform the service of the song, because you didn't really need the musical instruments. They were just kind of like an additional embellishment. So we say, well, that's not necessarily a proof. We could say the Kuliyama Ikashir Bekli, that everybody agrees that the main Shira, the main fulfillment of having song in the Beis Hamikdash is with musical instruments. So why then would a wooden musical instrument today not be good? Because you don't need it anymore. In other words, with Moshe Rabbeinu, his specific flute needed to be out of wood because when they put gold on it, it didn't sound as good. But we have lots of other musical instruments that we can use that are not wooden. The one who says that it's good says that, other utensils, the one who says that it's good says that we can utilize wooden utensils because since in this particular case, it was efshar to use anything else, even though it was only a kind of an exceptional case, we can derive other cases from the exceptional case. Among the apostle, one who says that it's no good, that case of the wooden flute of Moshe Rabbeinu was an exceptional case, and therefore I can't extrapolate from that case because I could use most of the other musical instruments were made out of metal, and I can really make do with metal alone. Or alternatively, that everybody agrees, number one, that you don't really need the musical instruments. They're not the main part of the mitzvah. The main part of the mitzvah is just singing with your voices. And that I would not be able to be makshir to say that a wooden utensil is good just because Moshe used a reed flute. But here, what they're arguing about is what we derive in connection with the menorah. The menorah was a kli, and the menorah was made out of gold. Gold is a metal. So do we say that all of the other sanctified utensils have to be metal like a menorah? Or do we say that no, it's also okay if you use wood? And the question is whether I derive from the case of menorah that the menorah teaches me, it says that you're going to make a kli shares and you're going to make it out of gold. So do I say that this is a klal uprat, or do I say that this is a riboy u miut? Rabbi Darish klali uprati. Rabbi, who is more machmir, says I include less because I derive the whole parsha of what qualifies as a klishares from menorah in the form of a klal uprat. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, who includes more, and therefore he says that a wooden utensil is okay. He derives everything from Darish Ribuye u Miyute. Rabbi Darish, what's the klal prata over here, or the Ribuye Miyut, as the case may be? What are the psukim that we're talking about? So the Gemara is going to tell us. Rabbi Darish klal prati. Rabbi derives the whole thing from a klal prat. Klal prat is more severe. I'm going to include less at the end because when I have a klal prat, I have a generalization followed by a specific a specific mandate. So then I say that the specific mandate limits exactly what I can bring to only that which is mentioned in the specific mandate. And that's it and nothing else. And then if I have another klal afterwards, it'll add a little bit more, but it's not going to add so much more. As opposed to if I learn from a riboy umiyut, so then I'll say, well, the original generalization include everything, and then the miyut just kind of like, it doesn't mean that I can only bring that which is mentioned in the miyut, and the exclusion means the exclusion kind of confines me to a particular category, and then if I have another generalization afterwards, I'm going to view that as another riboy, and then that's going to include everything again except for like one thing. I'll leave out one thing, but I'll include everything else. So what are the psukim? So it says, make a menorah. Okay, that doesn't tell me out of what material. That's a cloud. That's a generalization. Then it says, zahav or out of pure gold. That's a prat. That's a specification. Specification, according to Rebbe, that's all I can bring. Miksha, you should make it out of one piece. Taseh menorah. So that doesn't tell me out of what material. Just as long as it's one piece, just taseh menorah, make the menorah. Chazu cloud. So that's another generalization. So according to Rebbe, I have a generalization, specification, and generalization. So when I had a specification, that meant I could only use gold. So now that I have the generalization just adds things that are similar to gold. What's similar to gold? Well, anything that's made out of metal. So therefore, everything else has to be made out of metal as well. and that would come to exclude a wooden instrument from being a klishares and being a ministering vessel. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Darsh Miyutik. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda darshins in a more expansive manner as a ribuyom miyut. We see some menorah, so that's a riba. That's a very strong generalization that includes like everything. So haftorah, that's a miyat. That's an exclusion, not a specification, but an exclusion means I'm going to exclude a certain category. But I'll include, a whole general category. What's the general category? The general category is going to be things like gold, namely metal. Miksha tasem menorah. At one piece, you're going to fashion the entire menorah. You're going to chop away at one piece to fashion the menorah. Cause of a riba. So now that's going to include more than the specific category. It's going to include all categories except for like one item. Cause of riba, for riba call. You're going to include everything except for like one little thing you'll exclude. So my Rabbi, call me, you include everything. My miyat, what are you going to exclude? I'll exclude a kind of like the least, viable candidate to serve as a ministering vessel. The thing that is the most unlike metal. What's the most unlike metal? That's not going to be wood. Wood is, close enough that we're going to be marbe it once I have the final reboy. What I'm going to exclude is just a forlorn earthenware vessel. My miyat shel cheres. Okay, cheres, earthenware. Earthenware you're not going to be allowed to use for a ministering vessel, but wood's going to be okay. So Amar Papa Kitanai, Rav Papa said that it's like the machlokes as to whether the ikashir is bepeh b'kli is the main service of song in the Beis Hamikdash through musical instruments or through voices alone. That is like the following machlokes tanoim, because the Mishnah says Avdei Kohanim. This is a Mishnah in Erechin. Avdei Kohanim Hayu, that the people who would stand on the next to the korban and they would play the musical instruments when a korban was brought, they were avdabadim. They were slaves. Okay, you're not even allowed to marry a slave because the slave hasn't, been completely emancipated. Avdei Kohanim Hayu, they were the slaves of the Kohanim. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, no, they were very miyukastic people, but they weren't Leviim or Kohanim. They were Yisraelim. They were from very distinguished, illustrious families. Mishpachas Beis Hapigorim, Mishpachas Beis Siparia, Meimumayu. They were from the town of Imum, and they were very distinguished, well-respected people of good pedigree. Shayumasi and the Kuna, that if the men would die, the women, they were almonos, they could even marry a Kohen, and the daughters were considered to be prime candidates to marry Kohanim because they had very good yichus. Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, this is all year around. Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, Omer, Leviim, he said, no, they were Leviim. That the ones who would play the musical instruments next to the korban, they were Leviim. So my love, they're not arguing about this precise point. The mandam avadim, you the ones who said they were avadim. Okay, so avadim. The reason you're allowed to use mir avadim is because the main service of the song was with the voices and not the musical instruments. You can have anybody playing the musical instruments. And therefore you can allow anyone to play the musical instruments. Mandam Leviim are you? And the ones who said that they were Leviim, the main service is with the musical instruments, and therefore you need the actual Leviim. It's going to be like a real service, so the Israelim would be considered to be disqualified from performing the service. This is why you need the Leviim who are specifically designated to perform service in the Beis Hamikdash. But Tizbra, well, wait a second, that doesn't work in terms of the intermediate shita. The intermediate shita is Rabbi Yossi, who says that they were distinguished Yisraelim of good pedigree. Rabbi Yossi, Ma'ikasavar, Ikasar, Ikashir Bepeh. If he held that the main service is with the voices, so then even the Abido Avadim Nami, even the Avadim can play the musical instruments. And if he held that the main service is with the utensils, the musical instruments, so then he would have to require Dafka, Leviim, Yisraelim low, and we should not allow Yisraelim even of high pedigree, even well-heeled Yisraelim of good pedigree. El Kliyama, rather, that is not really a good explanation of the machlokes over here. We can explain that all three shitos are of the opinion that Ikashir Bepeh, that the main service is with the voices. So how can we probably, what they're arguing about is what were the inferences that would be made if a person would be granted the privilege of playing the musical instrument? What could we infer from that about their status? The Marasavahaki of a Maise, that each one held that this is what was done. Based on what was done in the base of Mikdash, we can infer certain things regarding the status. What's the nafkamina? What's the nafkamina? How exactly it was done in the base of Mikdash? In terms of what were the inferences that we can make, that there is this a person who's qualified to marry the people of the highest pedigree within the Jewish people? That's Yuchsin. Ula Meiser are these people who are qualified to eat Meiser, which mean are these people Levium, Kami Pagi. That's what they argue about. Mandam Avadim. You the opinion, the first opinion said they were Avadim. That we don't make any inferences. We don't assume that the people can marry within the Jewish community, that they can eat Meiser, so they may as well be Avadim. You and the one who said that they were Israelim, so the opinion that we would assume that these are people of good pedigree, and therefore they can marry the most distinguished people in the Jewish community, even Kohanim, but we don't assume that these people are Levium, of Alola Meiser, that we would give them Meiser to eat. You and the opinion who said that they're Levium, well, the opinion that if these a person is playing the musical instrument next to the Korban, then we assume that they are Levium, that they're people of good pedigree, and that they're people that we could give Meiser to. That's what they're arguing about, but this would not be an indication that they're arguing about whether Ikashir is prepared or Bakli, and we'll stop here. Okay.